Welcome, and thank you for choosing to listen to this message brought to you by Glenwood Community Church. We trust that it will be a blessing and an encouragement.
Married for now 7 years. Started 8 years ago. And this lovely young gentleman over here with a bit of a parting between us two um, was serving. And we go back a long way. Uncle John's been part of my life for ages. And it's a blessing to know this wise gentleman. If I lavish on more, you pay me later, yeah? Thanks. Although, mate, it's rands. I don't know. I'm now Pommy land, the pound's lacquer, as they say at the moment. Yeah, no problem. Take me out for that cup of coffee. But I remember the elders saying to me 7 years ago when I was working here, Matt, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I hated the question because that's a long time away. And I always used to say, I'd love to go back to England one day because that's where all my family are from originally. Mum and Dad moved out here some 40 years ago, but I've still got my cousins and stuff over there. I'm an only child, so I was kind of like, yeah, one day it'll be nice to go home. And I never thought anything of it. And then when I got married, I was like, okay, God, make a deal's the wrong word, but for the sake of anything else, God, let's make a deal here. When you want me to go, you need to tell me, but you need to make Karina the one that wants to go, because you know where I stand. I'm torn between the idea I could never leave here, but when it's time, it's time. And left it at that for 5 years. And we were over there, we were over in Madeira visiting her parents in March, April 2013. May, she's shouting at me, May, I was close, I was getting there. I remember we were, obviously she was pregnant with Christopher at the time. We had finished, we were still building stuff at our house that we had moved into, and we were basically preparing to stay here and have the baby and all that stuff. And we were sitting on the veranda of her parents' house, and she turned to me and she said, I'm ready. And I was like, ready for what? Baby can't come yet, it's only like 4 months. And she was like, no, I'm ready to move. And I was like, okay. Hadn't thought about that one for a long time, was always there, but it was kind of God going, now's the time, think about it. Actually, it wasn't even think about it. It was like, now's the time, make a plan. And I was like, okay. I was due to go over to England for a week to go and visit my family, and so I thought, let's see where this one goes. I went over there, before I started emailing a few people I knew, and I managed to arrange a meeting in a church, and I went over there to a Church of England, Anglican church, a beautiful building, one of those that were built in like 1460 or whatever. And I was expecting to find a vicar that was from about that time as well. A really old man, dressed in white sackcloth, come out with a big silver chain around this thing, not because he was cool, but because he was afraid of vampires. I don't know. And I went to this church, and I was really struck by the beautiful architecture of the building and the moss all over it. I was like, obviously they need someone like David and Bussy to come over and clean, but they couldn't afford it, I don't know. But sitting there waiting, and no one really told me what to do, so I was a bit lost, a bit confused. Like 10 minutes went by, 20 minutes went by, a whole bunch of girls arrived to do ballet in the hall, and I was like, that's cool, They let out their hall for events and all that stuff. And then I found out later that it had nothing to do with the church. I was like, oh, they're just in it to make money. Like all good churches should be. John, I think you need to make a plan. But we paid off the house, so it's okay. But I eventually then got told I have to go over to like the house across the road. So I went across there, and I was expecting to knock and find this old man. I knocked, and there was a bloke that answered the door that was about 7 feet tall, and he was young. And I was like, hi, I'm here to see your dad. And he was like, no, you're here to see me. I was like, wow, okay. So, I had all these stereotypes about the church in England, or specifically the Church of England. And here, one of those got kicked out the park already. He was a young bloke, late 30s, got a family of 4. He was literally about to go off to Wales for the weekend, but he had taken time to show me around and talk to me. And bless him, he took the time. I was there for about an hour. We spoke about this very early decision of mine, or choice. And he took me around the church and explained a bit about the church. And I was really encouraged because I had this whole misconception that the church in England was dead. And that was a big worry, because being part of a church here and going over there, I was like, well, God, you're calling me into ministry, but if there's nothing to go into, what am I going to do? And I'm certainly not going to work at those churches where there's a pastor that doesn't believe, which I trust Dean and John do, and so that's good, and going there would be really different. Plus, they got a funny accent and everything else. And ended off there, was emailing a few people looking, and I was really struck by the amount of churches that were seeking children and family pastors. And I was like, wow, there's a boom. When I say a boom, I must have come across 500 jobs within 1 week. I was like, that is insane. Across the Methodist, the Church of England, High Anglican, Low Anglican, Left Anglican, whatever they are, across the free churches, Baptist churches, there was just hundreds and hundreds of jobs. And I was like, wow, again, another misconception. I thought churches in England don't really have that kind of thing. They just have clubs. And, they have like scouts and girl guides and religious knowledge that they have in school that no one really cares about. And again, I was like, wow, okay, God, you're starting to stir up something here. Came back to South Africa. I think the second day of being back, I walked into John and Dean's office and I was like, hey, this is what God's saying. And it was met with approval. And it was like, Matt, we think it's a good idea. I don't know if that was because John just wants to get rid of me, but I hope not, because he says he misses me. But it was like, no, it's time. And again, that was God just going, approving. And I was like, okay, we're definitely starting something here. The problem was I then had to think of a plan to then go tell my mum and dad, who were expecting their first grandson. And I was about to go, actually, you're not going to have him here because I'm about to go across the seas, and now you're going to have to make a plan. And I was dreading that because I'm an only child. I'm a bit of a mummy's boy. And I was like, okay, let me just go tell my dad first and just ignore my mum, because I thought I don't want the walk to work. It's a big enough decision. I still don't really know what's happening. And so I went to my dad and I said, Dad, this is what we're thinking. This is what God's told me. And my dad went, Matt, you've got my blessing. And I was like, what? My dad never uses the word blessing. And the fact my dad reacting like that, I was like, okay. And again, God was going, don't worry, things will fall into place. And eventually I did get around to talking to my mum. And again, it was met with a bit of, but my grandson and my son and what have you. But then she went, but Matt, it's the right choice. And I was like, wow, okay, that's amazing. The small problem was that I had a house and a car and all that stuff that I needed to sell before going overseas. And so we kind of made this decision that we were going to sell, but it needed to happen within a time frame. It's now May, and we wanted to leave in October. And for those of you that have sold property know that it's not necessarily the most stress-free, easy thing under the sun. And so we decided we were going to put the house on the market and kind of went, God, again, if this is you, stuff's going to happen. And we put it on the market on the Thursday evening. My friend, bless her, who worked for Malcolm Plint, brought a client round, and the house was sold that evening. And I was like, wow, one day, not even one day, a few hours. And that was kind of like the point where the light bulb kind of turned on and turned really bright and went, okay, God, something's happening. But then at that point I went, okay, God, this thing's going to happen, but it needs to kind of happen by this day. And I think breakup day was the 28th of September or something, and Karina ran a swimming business from home. I had commitments here at the church. I was running the first children's camp that we had as a Baptist Union, and I was like, that was a great privilege. So I didn't want to give that up because that was something I'd looked forward to. And obviously with Karina running the business, we were like, the money would be good, so we can't like move out the house until breakup day. And so we kind of went, God, if this is going to happen, it needs to happen then. Now, I don't like bartering with God. In the Bible, people have tried, it doesn't go too well. I was like very tempted to be like Gideon and put like my coat on the floor and go, God, if you want to, but that doesn't always happen. And so God just went, trust me. And so my wife and I started praying, and we had this little blackboard in the kitchen, and we started putting up scriptures, and God gave me a few scriptures. And the one he gave me right at the beginning of my ministry was Jeremiah 29, verse 11, and most of you know it. But it says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. And I was like, cool. I remember that. It stays with me. But at the time, it was just a verse. And now it started to have a little bit more importance to it. And then he said, how's about this for something else? And he said, try Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. And it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways follow him, and he will make your path straight. And I was like, okay, those are cool verses, but what do they mean? And then it went quiet for like a month. I was looking for jobs. I was emailing people. I was sending out my CV. I just finished my studies. I was getting my degree. So that was all good. It taken me a long enough time to finish my bachelor in theology, but it was all done, which helped obviously on the CV and all that. And nothing was happening. And God just kept quiet. And, that's a difficult place, because now I decided to sell the house. I told the church I was leaving. They'd given me their blessing, but nada on the job front. It was like, you're going, I don't know where I'm going. I don't have a place to stay. I don't have a car. My family all think I'm insane. They're like, what are you doing? None of them are Christians, so they just don't get that element of it whatsoever. But it was like, just trust me. And so we did, and looked at a few jobs, had some really humorous encounters. I emailed a church who emailed me back, and they were like, Matt, we would love you to come over on Sunday. Can you be at the 9 o'clock service? We would like to interview you. I was like, small problem. What might that be? I live 36,000 kilometers away from where you are. I live in South Africa. Oh, please note, we will not pay for your air ticket. I was like, I figured that much. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. Can we arrange Skype? Bless her. She was quite an old lady. She was like, I don't know what that is. I was like, if you don't know what Skype is, I don't know if I really want to. We're not going to work. It's just not going to happen. And then I got another response from another church. She said, we're an Anglican church based in the beautiful fields of whatever. We're 400 years old, whatever. We have a congregation of 296 people, of which 85% are over the age of 80. We've had 22 funerals and 2 weddings in the last year. To which I responded and I said, you desperately need a youth worker. Otherwise, your church will literally be dead. God had a better plan. Thankfully, none of those really worked out. I did have a bit of a ping-pong match with one church. This church that asked me to come over, they were like, oh, we can make a plan. We want you to come and do an assembly. I was like, again, small problem. I'm on the other side of the world. I'm like, we can make a plan. We can do a phone call, kind of like, what do those call those things? Conference call, what have you. Bless her, she tried hard, but it just never happened. And again, we were back at square one again. The house was kind of moving, but no real answer on that. We had decided that things was going to stop on the 28th of September. The job front had got really quiet, and I'd gone away on winter camp. And it's a good time of year because it's around about now. And came back from winter camp, and Sunday evening was coming to church, and it had been quiet for about 2 weeks. And I remember going to have a lie down, and I said to Karina, I really want some encouragement. God, encourage me. And I went and had a sleep, woke up an hour later, and I got an email from a church going, Matt, we're interested. And I was like, cool. God, you answered prayer quite quickly. I'm quite glad. But through this whole journey, I had become really tangible with God. God had never been like that to me before. It wasn't like that close. He was there. I knew he was there. I knew he existed. I knew he loved me. I knew he had a plan for me. But this was actually happening before my eyes. And it was cool. But it was daunting, and it was scary, and it was uncertain, and this unknown thing of what was about to happen. And thankfully, that didn't work out, but it was the encouragement of that. And then we went away on this children's camp, and that was amazing to be with those kids. And it was like a bit of a heart sore, because I was kind of going, I'm doing this thing, and I'd love to stay, but I'm mindful that now I'm about to leave. Like, my tickets were booked to fly to Heathrow on the 4th of October, I think it was. And I was mindful that this was happening. And now we were on the 22nd of September, and I finally had got an email back from this guy, Mark, in England. And he was talking to me about where they were standing as a church, and he wanted an associate pastor, but they weren't sure if that was going to work out. But there was 3 other people in the running. And so I just said to him, listen, mate, can you just be my mentor? I knew where he was. He was in a place called Dartford, which is quite close to where my nan lives. So I was like, you're not far. If I need to travel, it's like an hour trip. I can meet with you. We can pray and all that stuff. And he was like, absolutely. I'll keep that in mind. And that was cool. But again, still nothing. And it was the night before breakup day. And I was mindful that the next day, Karina was going to give up the business, that we were going to move up the house, because I told my parents we were going to move in with them. But the small problem was the house still wasn't settled. It wasn't sold. And I remember sitting really stressed that evening and praying, and Karina and I talking about stuff. And I was like, God, you've set this journey to happen. Hey, now's the crux. We've said the 28th of September. It's tomorrow. we need the house to sell because I kind of need some money to go to England, and we need it to all happen. I mean, I'd put plans in place of if it hadn't happened, like my dad was going to sort it out, but it's a bit daunting moving halfway around the world with no money, and especially with the pound being as strong as it is, some money would have been good, not £5, because that's nothing, that won't even buy me a chappie. And I woke up the next morning, went and had a shower, was about to leave for work, and I got a text message from the attorneys to say, Mr. Pierce, the transfer is complete, your house is now sold. And I remember bursting into tears because it was the 28th of September. And I went, God, you are fantastic. Even now, I still cannot believe how amazing God was in that precise moment. Again, I say it, it's never happened before, and yet God was going, there we go. So great, now the house was sold. I moved into my parents'. I had finished working at the church, but as you know, they can't get rid of me, so I was still here practically every day. I'd sold one of my cars, so there was money there, and that was cool, and I'd made a plan for money to be sent over to England. The problem was that I hadn't booked anywhere to stay, and my mum was going, Matt, you do realize you leave in 6 days and you have nowhere to live. And so I was like, I guess I better make a plan, because my family didn't really want me just couch surfing. They were like, that's not going to happen. Your wife's heavily pregnant. What if the water breaks on the couch? Then, it's our problem. And I was like, no, that's cool. Don't worry. It's fine. Don't stress. I also don't want to make it their burden. And so I started looking online, and I found this amazing deal with this little place right next to Gatwick Airport. And we had booked a 2-week stay at this hotel, and it worked out to be something like £150 or something. It worked out to be something like £9 a night or something, which was just crazy, considering it's about £30 to £40 a night. And again, I was just like, God, thanks. And we booked a car, and the same thing with the car. It also worked out to be something like £6 a day or something. We booked that for 2 weeks. The problem was I didn't realize I was a bit of a moron, because I'd booked to fly into Heathrow, and I'd now booked a hotel in Gatwick. For those of you that have been to England, they're quite a long way away. Thankfully, I'd booked the car from Heathrow. So that was okay. I thought I'll just drive. I kind of know England okay. It's not too difficult. They have maps and GPSs, which are fantastic because they argue with you if you go the wrong way. And I was like, don't worry, we'll make a plan. So that was all booked. We were ready to go, packed our bags, got to the airport on the 4th of October, checked everything in, bless them. We were flying Emirates. They're a fantastic airline. Got on the plane. Karina had to have this letter to say that she was so many months pregnant and she wasn't going to pop on the plane and everything was okay. I think there's a maximum of 36 weeks or something. And she had it all, except the problem was it was dated September, and we were flying out October. And bless him, we had this French guy who was the head of the air hostesses, what have you, air stewards. And he looked and he was like, no, you cannot fly. It is old. I was like, what do you mean it's old? He's like, no, it says September. It is October. You cannot fly. Get off of my plane. And I was like, what? But again, throughout all, we were the first people on the plane. By the time everyone else had got onto the plane, he was phoning, I don't know who he was phoning, his mother in Paris or something, because he took forever to then finally give us this decision that we could not fly. And I was like, okay. But in that moment, I had absolute peace. And Karina was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I don't know. But God's got our back. I think it was because everything else had happened. I just went, hey, you know what? I just got to trust God. And we got chucked off the plane. And I remember standing there on this little red line. For those of you that have ever been chucked off a plane before, you can't legally cross the metal barrier. Even though it's still Durban, you're not technically in Durban anymore. I was like, this is amazing. It's like Doctor Who. I'm in a parallel universe, but I'm in King Shaka Airport. And he was like, no, we need to book you back in. I was like, okay. The problem was it was now 9:30 and everyone had gone home. They were like, we need to phone someone. I was like, today or tomorrow? So they eventually arrived an hour later. But I remember phoning my mum and my dad and being like, Dad, only joking, you need to come pick me up. And he was like, you're pulling my leg. I was like, seriously? No, I'm standing in the airport. Turn around, come pick me up. They've chucked me off the plane. And so, yeah, that was the hassle. The next day we had to go to Emirates, rebook our flights. But what was amazing is we booked a cheaper flight to Gatwick. And I was like, yes, so I don't need to drive. And then I phoned the car company, and they're like, don't worry, Mr. Pierce, we'll just book the car at Gatwick. And I was like, yes. Even when I'd been a bit of a moron, God was like, don't worry, I got your back. And so we flew, and everything was fine, and we got there, and I got the car. And what was even better, when I got the car, it had this lovely computer screen in the middle. And had all these buttons, and you pressed it, and she started speaking to me. It was like, hello, I am your friend. I will tell you where to go. And I was like, wow. Although I don't think she liked me, because whenever we went places, we went up these stupid little lanes where it was wide enough for, one tire, and you had to drive up on the side of the road, and then God forbid another car came towards you, and then it was like, now what do you? And then she just kept quiet. As good as I'm not going to be sexist because I might get myself into trouble, but it did have a female voice. Just saying. But we finally got there. Again, I didn't have a job. I had somewhere to stay. I had a car, but we were like, what do we do? And I didn't want to start looking at places to rent or what have you because I didn't know where I was going to be. I mean, England's not a big place, but it's quite big in terms of the areas and where you are. And anyway, this guy that was mentoring me phoned me back and he said, Matt, things have kind of changed. We're now looking for someone to run up the youth and stuff. He said, we're interested. Can you come over this Sunday? And I was like, yeah, cool. And he told me where he was, and I was like, oh, that's really not far. And so he said, come over Sunday for the service, spend time, and then we'll have a chat after the service. And funny enough, at the same time, this other bloke from a church in Nottingham was phoning me, and he was like, Matt, we want you. And I was like, okay, but you need to understand, I'm not free this Sunday. And he was like, no, and he got really abrupt with me on the phone. He was like, no, you don't understand, we want you. Friday you need to come up, we're having a whole weekend, and we've got 3 other people coming, and you need to be there. And I was like, no, you're not listening to me, someone else beat you to it. Unfortunately, they got there first, I'll come up on Monday. And he was like, no, but you, and I was like, just chill, if it's happening, I'll come up on Monday. And he got really aggressive with me, and I was like, I don't know if I want you as my pastor. But anyway, went up to this church on the Sunday, and we didn't really expect much. We were like, hey, it's cool, we're going somewhere, drove in, and it was like home, as in it was like here. It didn't have pews, and it wasn't a pretty building, but it was like that same feeling of just being back at Glenwood. And they were having a combined service with their other 2 churches that were involved, and walked in and everyone greeted us and they were like, hi, and I was like, hello, and they're like, oh, you've got a funny accent, and I was like, I'm from South Africa, and then they're like, oh, you're the guy, and I was like, what do you mean? And then they explained that they kind of been told that they had this position available, and then I met the pastor, and he was quite nice. I don't know what it is, but he comes from a Baptist church, and most Baptist ministers have this issue with hair growing over here. Just saying, but it must be something about wisdom or something, I don't know, but he's got the same thing, John. It's the look. It is the look. But anyway, he's like that as well. He's like a younger version of this young man over here. And he greeted me, and I remember we walked into the church, and this is what did it for me. We got given a bulletin like what you get here. And on the front page of the bulletin was Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. And I remember looking at that and going, okay, that's interesting. Walked into the church, and the biggest banner I've ever seen in my life was Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And I remember sitting there with Karina and going, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he just went, this is it. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, this is it. And I was like, okay. Had the church service, went and had this meeting, and they spoke to me afterwards and they said, Matt, we want to employ you. And I was like, fantastic. And then from that, we ended up buying a car, renting a flat, having a baby, buying a house, all that jazz. And my family went, you're mad. And I went, you know what? When God's got your back, you can do everything within like a week. And they looked at me and they were like, we don't understand. I was like, that's cool, because I do. And trying to explain it to you is not going to make any sense, but hey, I can pray. And nearly 2 years later, we found ourselves absolutely blessed with a lovely little boy most of the time. And in a place where we love. And you know, I miss a lot of South Africa. I miss the culture, and I miss the people, and I miss here. But I do not regret the move, because God's like, hey, it's the right time, it's the right thing. And it just leads me on very quickly to a message of mission. And as a church and as a people, being bold enough to mission. I've moved to a country where Christianity isn't as well accepted as it is here. I really miss the fact that Africa, whether you're black, white, colored, whatever you are, people have this ability to believe in something. In England, it's the complete opposite. It's met with hostility. It's met with an attitude of we don't care. In most places. There are places that's great. I'm blessed. I'm involved in 3 schools, and it's going really well. But I laugh, because most of the high schools, majority of them are black kids. And I'm like, but that's because you get it. Because you come from Africa, you get it. You get there's something more. It's getting through to these pompous English people. That's the problem. But God is good, and it's happening. And it really got me when I was thinking about this mission thing. And I thought, you know what, God, is this message even worth preaching here? But he went, yeah, it's a reminder. It's a reminder of what mission's all about. And when you think of mission, is it the whole thing of going and telling someone about Jesus? Standing on the street corner with a sign that says turn or burn? Is it about going and knocking on people's doors? What is it all about? And I know some of you've got it, you know, in the sense of you know what it means to have a missional heart. I'm not talking about giving money to the missions committee. I'm talking about something that each and every one of us can do. Jesus says in Mark 16, verse 15, says, and he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, to everyone that you meet. So does that mean we all need to be pastors? Does that mean we all need to be preachers? No. In Matthew 28, verse 18 to 20, it's the Great Commission, and it says, and Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and I am with you always, even till the end of the age. So Jesus then gives us hope. He says, even though you're not a preacher, even though you don't have this great ability or spiritual gift, whatever we want to label it as, he says, I'm with you, so don't worry. God has given to all believers this thing called the Great Commission, to preach the good news and to make disciples. However, the problem is that few Christians respond to this call. It's time to get back to the basis of what it means to be a disciple. You know what? And the thing I love here, seeing some of the younger guys, the kids that I've been involved with. And I remember going through some stuff 2 years ago and talking about disciples and saying to them that, you know what, even kids can be disciples. Because you can be. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's about having the ability to just share the love of Jesus. Quickly, I want to look at some of the most common fears of being a mission person. The most common fear, I think, for most people is the fear of being rejected. We don't like the concept of going to tell someone something and then maybe they're not going to listen or they're going to ridicule us or something like that. There was a survey that was done by a training session from Billy Graham, the great evangelist, and he asked people, he said, what is your greatest hindrance to witnessing? And it came back something like this. It said 9% said that they were too busy to remember what to do. That's probably a bit higher for some more of us. 28% said they felt the lack of real information to share, so they hadn't really been schooled in this ability to go and preach. The nice thing was that none said that they didn't really care, so that was good. 12% said that their own lives were not speaking as they should, so they weren't really living a life that was Christ-like. And then 51% said their biggest problem was the fear of how the other person would react. None of us likes to be rejected, ridiculed, or regarded as an oddball. Granted. If you have a Bible, turn with me quickly to Luke chapter 10, verses 1 to 9, and this is going to be the main text, and it's going to be quick because I know someone's moved that clock that never worked, but it was great when you wanted to see the time. Hey, you know what? There isn't one, so I've got no excuse now. Please don't fall asleep, though, because that would be embarrassing if you snore very loudly. Luke 10, verse 1 to 9 says, after these things, the Lord appointed 70 or 72 and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself was about to go. Then he said to them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go your way. Behold, I send you out as lambs among wolves. Carry neither money, bag, rucksack, sandals, and greet no one along the road. But whatever house you enter, first say, peace to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest on it. If not, it will return to you. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not go from house to house. Whatever city you enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you, and heal the sick there, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you. Jesus' keys to effective evangelism. Now, I believe there are 5 things that we can learn from that small passage of Scripture. Firstly, something very important is Jesus says to send out them in pairs. So, in other words, when doing something and you feel a bit daunted, take a buddy along with you. Preferably someone that's like-minded and a Christian, because otherwise that might be a bit awkward if you start preaching to a Jehovah's Witness and then they start agreeing with the other person. Preferably like-minded, two believers. Take a buddy. Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2 in verse 1. Verse 3, expect persecution. Jesus sends out us as lambs among wolves. Not everyone you speak to is going to have this knowledge of a Christianity. And especially today, not everyone's going to want to receive that love of Jesus. They might think that you're a bit weird. So expect it, but don't let it ruin the moment. Verse 4, again, travel light. In today's world, we have become so busy and sophisticated. God forbid that you're in a situation and you hear that lovely noise. Oh, probably not anymore, but you know what I mean. You know, the old mobile phone rings and then you're like, either feel really embarrassed or have to then interrupt this spiritual moment to go, oh, I'm busy, mate, and then turn it off. You know, I know some of us live on the things. I remember being born in a generation where they didn't exist until I was in grade 10. And then it was all about this thing. You would sit on one side of the room and you would talk to your mate four places next to you on the thing. They're wonderful, but they can also get in the way. Fourthly, spend time building relationships with people, entering homes and sharing meals together. The most effective ministry is that which flows from relationships. Pretty much what it says. Build relationships with people, and then when you know them, they know you, and it's easier to talk, it's easier to engage, it's easier to have great, deep conversations. Fifthly, be a blessing to them. Jesus says to bring peace to people's homes and to heal the sick. It sounds difficult, but it's not that bad. An illustration, a pastor was repairing the church fence, and a boy was standing nearby for a long while. And the pastor said to him, do you want to speak with me, son? No, I'm just waiting. Waiting for what? Said the pastor. Waiting to hear what a pastor says when he hits his finger with a hammer. We live in a society and a generation today that when people know we're churched, they watch us because they want to see who we are. And God forbid that there's these two different people. For those that know me, generally I like to think I'm the type of guy that I am who I am. I don't like to think that I have two personalities. But some of us, it's very easy to have this Sunday personality and then have a Monday personality. And they're polar opposites of each other. Come to church on a Sunday, hear the word, praise Jesus, go to work on a Monday, and it's like, I'm too busy for that. As Christians, we are called to be light in our dark world. We are blessed to be a blessing. Jesus speaks about it in the Sermon on the Mount, and he speaks about us being the light of the world. And he says, do you place a light under a bucket? He says, no, you put it on a lampstand where it can light a room. You know, and for those of you that know Jesus, you've got that light in you. And so be proud of that light and let it shine. It's just like if someone found a cure for cancer but didn't share it with anyone. That's what it's like when we don't tell people about the gospel. For those of you that are in that place and you're saved and you know Jesus, well, what do we believe? We believe that because we know Jesus, we get to go to heaven one day. For those people that don't know Jesus, well, where do they go? Well, my Bible tells me that for them that don't know Jesus and who haven't called on the name of the Lord, well, they go to hell. And we said earlier that it's important to be in relationships with people, so we are in relationships with people who don't know Jesus, and therefore one day when they die, you kind of get the gist, right? And it costs you nothing to just be like, do you want to accept Jesus? And you know what? I believe that Jesus could blow your socks off. I've been on a journey enough to know that sometimes we create these perceptions in our mind that people won't believe, or it might be met with hostility, or maybe someone else will do it. But it's amazing what happens when you say something and then that person realizes and it clicks. And then you're like, wow, God. It's like, for those of you that have ever been into like adrenaline junkie stuff, I remember the first time I ever went abseiling, I was absolutely petrified. I did it and then I was like, I want to do it again. I didn't die and it was amazing. God bless you if you're the type of person that wants to jump out of an aeroplane or something like that. Good for you. Not my cup of tea, but the same thing. When you do it and God rewards you, you want to do it again. There was a man by the name of D.L. Moody. Some of you guys have heard of that name before. One day, D.L. Moody was walking down the street and approached a man and asked if he would like to meet Jesus. The man was irritated and said, "Sir, mind your own business." Moody's response was, "But sir, this is my business." And the man turned around and said, "Well, in that case, you must be D.L. Moody." He was so well known for doing what he did in evangelizing and speaking to people about Jesus that people knew who he was. And I'm not saying that every single one of us should be in that place, but are we in a place that people know, first and foremost, that we're a Jesus believer, that we have a relationship with Jesus? Because that's important. And I'm not saying that we go walking around with a sign on our back, but generally, when you know Jesus, people see him in your life. You work that one out for yourself. 5 different ways to evangelize. And some of them are easy, some of them not so easy. But first and foremost is paper evangelism. It's something that was a boom back in the 70s and 80s, all these tracts and all that stuff. That's fantastic. I have heard so many testimonies of people in church over in England that have come to know Jesus because someone took the time to just give them a piece of paper to read. I know it's irritating. I know that Jehovah's Witnesses give out their magazine and all that stuff, and a lot of people, it's frustrating. They don't want to read stuff. Hey, but it's a way. Another way to do it is a form of paper evangelism, and you guys are doing this on the 26th of July, I believe it is. You guys are starting Alpha. 12 weeks of Alpha. Is it 6 weeks? 16. But you're not going to be having evening service. And you're going to be meeting in the hall, and there's going to be food. Oh, mate, food is a lacquer way to get people to experience Jesus. Ask some of my youth folks at the back there. Am I right, guys? If it wasn't for family nights, you wouldn't be here, yeah? Food's a lacquer way, as you can see. Most Baptist pastors have a bit of a bop. It's not because they drink, it's because they like their food. Or at least I'd hope. But Alpha's a great way to introduce people who aren't Christians to this thing, because it's done in such a way that it's easy, it's presentable, it's friendly. And again, there's food. But if you can, I want to encourage you to bring people along that don't know Jesus to come along to Alpha. And to pray that God will do something in their lives. Secondly is place evangelism. What I mean by that, it's inviting your friends to a place where they can hear the gospel. Exactly like Alpha, but also to a Sunday morning service where maybe something special happening. An Easter service or a Christmas service, I love my dad, bless him, but I remember when I moved over to England, he was like, I had this deep chat with him about church, and he went, "Matt, church to me is a bit like this." And I was like, "What?" He's like, hatched, matched, and dispatched. Christenings, weddings, and funerals. There's a lot of people that are like that. There's a lot of people that will come to church just over Easter and just over Christmas. But you know what? That's the time when there's fish there, and there's time to be fishers of men. And there's time to catch them and to go alongside them and to love them and to be friends, to build that relationship first, not to Bible bash them. There's a time for that, but try the friendship route first. Thirdly is personal evangelism, leading on to that thing of building relationships. Build relationships with non-Christians. Show them that we're normal. Okay, we are a bit weird, but so is everyone. But the fact that knowing Jesus doesn't make you a strange person with like different limbs and everything else, that you're a normal person. You know what? I even want to maybe encourage you to hang out where they hang out. I know that's a difficult one, okay? Yes, there's temptation in whatever that might be, but you know what? If it means going out with your work friends after work and they're going to have a drink, what's stopping you to go with them to show them that you're normal? I'm not saying get drunk with them. I'm saying go and just join them. It's personal evangelism. Jesus never went, "Oh, I'm not going there." He hung out with the prostitutes. I could imagine Jesus going and hanging out with all his chommies that were like a bit dodgy. All the guys on the side of the street that smell a bit funny. Jesus wasn't scared to go up to them and love them. Maybe it's not your thing, but think about that one, the personal evangelism. Fourthly, prayer evangelism. There are some amazing prayer warriors in this church, and I know that they are, I was going to say past their sell-by date. No, they're not. I don't mean it like that. But past the age where they can walk around the streets, past the age when they can go out with their work friends. But what they can do is pray. And prayer works because God hears us, and we can pray for people to receive the love and to be healed. and for God to work in that way. And then fifthly is a prophetic evangelism. Share a prophetic word from God for people. Again, it's another way, but it's a way where when God speaks and someone hears that, it shoots right to the heart because it's truth. There was a man called Jim Elliot that said that man is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. In closing, a few more verses, but in Matthew 9:36-38, it says, "But when Jesus saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, 'The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest.'" Matthew 10:1 says, "The prayer was no sooner prayed than it was answered. Jesus called 12 as his followers and sent them into the right fields. He gave them power to kick out the evil spirits and to tenderly care for the bruised and hurt lives." That's from the Message. Mission and evangelism is a daunting prospect. But if I had to say to you, I had 1,000 rand in my pocket, and next week if you brought a friend to church, you would get 1,000 rand. I wonder how many of us would bring a friend to church next week because there was a reward. See, but that's easy because you can see it, it's tangible, it's there in front of you. But Jesus says, but the reward is greater in heaven. Think about that one. Think about that reward in heaven one day. We might do it for the love of money, but not for the love of God. I thank God that a friend loved me enough to tell me the good news about Jesus, because otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And maybe that applies for some of you as well. It was because one person loved you enough to share that good news with you, loved you enough to bring you along to church, loved you enough to give you a tract, loved you enough to spend some time on their knees praying for you. Praise God for that person. In closing, a story. On a dangerous sea coast where shipwrecks often occur, there was once a little life-saving station. The building was primitive and there was just one boat, but the members of the life-saving station were committed and kept a constant watch over the sea. When a ship went down, they unselfishly went out day or night to save the lost. Because so many lives were saved by that station, it became famous. Consequently, many people wanted to join the station to give their time, talent, and money to support its important work. New boats were bought, new crews were recruited, and a formal training session was offered. As the membership grew, some of the members became unhappy that the building was so primitive and the equipment outdated. They wanted a better place to welcome the survivors pulled from the sea. So they replaced the emergency cots with beds and put better furniture in the enlarged and newly decorated building. Maybe they added aircon. Now the life-saving station became a popular gathering place for its members. They met regularly, and it was apparent how they loved one another. They hugged each other, and they shared with one another, and they shared about events of their life, and they ate together. But few members were now interested in going to sea on life-saving missions. So they hired lifeboat crews to do this for them. About this time, a large ship was wrecked off the coast, and the hired crew brought into the life-saving stations cold, wet, dirty, sick, and half-drowned people. The beautiful meeting place became a place of chaos. The carpets got dirty, and so the property committee immediately had a shower built outside the house where the victims of the shipwreck could be cleaned up before coming inside. At the next meeting, there was a rift in the membership. Most of the members wanted to stop the club's life-saving activities, for they were unpleasant and a hindrance to the normal fellowship of the members. Other members insisted that life-saving was their primary purpose and pointed out that they were still called a life-saving station. But they were finally voted down and told that if they wanted to save the lives of all those people who would be shipwrecked, they could begin their own life-saving station further down the coast. And that's what they did. As the years passed and the new station experienced the same changes that had occurred in the old one, it evolved into a place to meet regularly for fellowship and for special training sessions about their mission. But few went out to the drowning people. History continued to repeat itself. And if you visit that seaside town today, you will find many meeting places with ample parking and plush carpeting. Shipwrecks are frequent in those waters, but most of the people drown. Are we like that life-saving station? It becomes important just to meet and hang out, but yet forget the means of why we exist. The church is very similar to that, in that we're a life-saving station where the cold, wet, dirty, and sick people can enter and be looked after and loved and taken care of and saved. But yet sometimes we become too consumed by the worldly things, hanging out together and being more concerned about what we got up to this weekend than actually making an effort. That's what mission's about. It's about us being prepared to love one another and then to share the good news. And I really do pray, and I'm very grateful for Glenwood Community Church and the opportunity that I've had here, for Karina and I, and for the special people and friends that we've made, and they're lifelong friends, I trust. But I've also learned that when it comes to mission, my mum said this great thing once. We were on our way to Marapiani. Have you still got links with Marapiani? I love Leonardus and Lorraine up there, but we were going up there, and it's probably a 10-hour drive in that lovely minibus. And we were about to go, and I remember my mum saying to me the night before we were leaving, Matt, I really don't understand why when you go on mission, you have to travel 10 hours away when the next door neighbors don't even know Jesus. And I was like, wow. I still went to Marapiani. It was a fantastic time, and there's a place for that link there. But it just made me really try and, think about this term mission and what it's all about. Do you even know your neighbors? Do they know that you're a Christian? Do they know you go to church? Hey, there was a lovely lady in my new church, and I was talking to my pastor about this whole missional attitude, and I was getting quite irritated because I was like, oh, the elders don't do anything and whatever, and the church, we do all these courses, but they don't do anything. And then he was like, let's just have a look. And so we thought, well, let's do one Sunday, having a look at people's lives. And we started talking to different people, and I was really blown away by some of the people's work. Like One Oak was off doing this thing with troubled youths, and he was having this ministry over there, and One Oak was in the prisons doing ministry over there, and one girl was ministering to a colleague at work and taking her out for coffee once a week. And I was like, wow, that's mission. Yes, it's great. We have people in Cyprus, and we've got people in Kenya, and we've got all that stuff, and that's fantastic. But it's what we can do where we're at now, with who we are, with this good news that we hold. And as I said earlier, it's about this thing about those people that don't know Jesus. We're mindful where we go when we know Jesus. What about them that don't know Jesus? And do we care? Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for just your word and for the blessing that you bestow on each one of us, and for your love and for your care. And God, I thank you that we can trust you in such a manner that you provide for us. And I pray for each and every one present this evening, God, that might find themselves in a situation where they need a bit of faith, a bit of hope, a bit of a sign, Lord. I pray that, God, you would speak to them directly this evening, today, into this week, that you would be part of their situations, wherever they might find themselves, Lord. And God, I know life is hard and life is difficult, and we were never promised an easy road. But Father, give us the hope to know that with you, nothing is impossible. And God, you do have a plan for us, and your plan is good. And for us to really hold on to that and trust you for it, Lord. And when we do go through the valleys and it's difficult and hard, I pray that you would be there with us to lift us up and to let us soar on eagle's wings, God, and to know that you are with us. When things get quiet, God, I just pray we would have that peace to know that you are with us, even though you might not be speaking at that present time. God, bless your church and bless your people, I pray. May this place continue to be a place where people might come and feel your love. And may it be a life-saving station, that people would come and be saved, Lord. and then go out and do likewise to others, Lord. I pray for the Alpha course that's coming up. That would be an amazing blessing, Lord, that we might see people coming to know you, that we might see salvation, that we might see people growing in their relationship with you, and from that we might see people having a missional heart to go out and do likewise. God, thank you for what you do, for who you are, and for blessing us, I pray, Lord. Allow us to go away safely this evening and to have a good week ahead of us, I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this message by Glenwood Community Church. We hope that it has encouraged you. Feel free to copy and distribute this message to others, but please do not charge for the content or alter it in any way. For more information, visit us on the internet at www.glenwoodchurch.org.za.